Hello and a very warm welcome to everybody joining me for another installment of Inside SA Media, which is proudly brought to you by Tribox Media and Factfort. My name is Lungis Wanyakyo on a chair. Let's get into it. From the student uprisings of 1976 to the Fees Must Fall movements and beyond, protest has always been a language of South African democracy. It is how the voiceless demand to be heard when formal systems fail. But how the media covers protests often decides whether these voices are amplified or silenced. A protest is not a disturbance, it's a constitutional right, one that is rooted in the very fabric of democratic expression. Section 17 of South Africa's constitution protects peaceful assembly. Yet in newsroom decision-making processes, protests are too often treated as events to cover rather than democratic dialogues to unpack.
The institutions, the protocols for local democracy, participatory democracy, for ward committees, integrated development plans, development forums have failed communities, and communities knock on the door of councillors, mayors, Joburg Water, every official that they can get a hold of for years, as is the case in Westbury, but they don't get a response. Essentially, the government's reactive response to protest, instead of collaborating with communities, it means that they teach communities and they teach us that protest is possibly the only means by which you will be heard if you're from a community that lacks access to basic services.
When the Fees Must Fall movement peaked in 2015, many headlines led with the drama: burnt buildings, clashes with police, campus shutdowns. And the result of that was that the public perception was that of violent students rather than a generation desperate to access higher education. Now, the framing isn't unique to South Africa. In the United States, the Black Lives Matter was sometimes covered as a threat to law and order rather than a call for racial justice. The difference is that when coverage highlights chaos, it delegitimizes it. And when it highlights causes, it actually helps to humanize it. A Media Monitoring Africa study found only 13% of protest coverage in South Africa focused on underlying issues. The majority all just spotlighted the conflict. Media framing matters. A single editorial choice can shift meaning entirely. Take the Marikana strike of 2012. Coverage often emphasized violent clashes, the weapons, the standoff, and the deaths. But what about the stories of the miners who are struggling on 4,000 Rand a month? Coverage that dwells on spectacle misses the chance to explain why the protest is even happening in the first place, or why protests in general happen at all. In Nigeria, the NSAS protesters exposed police brutality to the world. In South Africa, service delivery protests erupt year after year over water, over electricity, housing, and so much more. Now, globally, movements like Black Lives Matter are tied to conversations on justice, but locally, our protests are often treated as disturbances, isolated, chaotic, disconnected from basically the broader struggles. The question is, does our media draw global connections, or does it stigmatize dissent at home? The media cannot claim neutrality when democracy is at stake. The responsibility lies in telling the full story. This means interviewing protesters about grievances. It means giving airtime to marginalized communities. It means providing context about systemic inequality. It also means avoiding lazy stereotypes, because every burning tire hides a story of exclusion, poverty, and absolute desperation. These are the moments when media coverage gets it right. During the 2020 GBV protests outside Parliament, some outlets moved beyond the visuals of police barricades to amplify survivors' voices and demand accountability. Now, this shift in focus reframed the protest from just another march to a national reckoning with violence against women. In the kind of world we live in today, the media is not just press, because we've got social media, and social media algorithms decide which stories travel and which stories disappear. Research shows that sensational images like fires, clashes, violence, these are more likely to trend. This then incentivizes both the traditional and digital media to spotlight conflict. The result of that is that protests end up becoming a spectacle, and then there's no substance. And while you're letting that sink in, according to the Reuters Institute, 42% of South Africans rely on social media as their primary source of news. Protest is not the problem, it's democracy in motion. The real question, however, is will the media empower these democratic dialogues or simply continue to stigmatize them by focusing only on conflict? The choice, as always, lies in how the story is told. Thank you so very much for joining me for today's installment of Inside SA Media. I certainly hope that it's made you think a little bit deeper about the role of the media in society and also the role of protests in South Africa. We will be back together here again next week for another installment of Inside SA Media, where we continue to hold a mirror to the stories that we tell. From myself, Lungiswa Onachia, it is goodbye.